Text-based, excuse me. This is text-based. You have one? Okay, good. Now, first of all, nobody is doing this. Nobody is doing Socratic straight to YouTube. We're the only people in the universe that are doing it. Okay? Okay, that's number one. So, to that end, we are validating your impressions of this work. Now, your impressions, this is a student-centered learning environment. You guys are driving the dialogue. I will pose questions, but we will let the questions start to lead to other questions. The notion of a Socratic is that one question leads to another, leads to another. You, instead of, and as I've mentioned before, it's not a debate, it's a discussion. You should use, though, our argumentative terms like, I hear your claim, I would like to add to it, or I would like to dispute your claim. Can you prove this? Then there's other words like, when have you said this before? You want to ask questions that deepen your understanding of the text. Again, we call it open inquiry. That means we are actively exploring this text. Now, we have slowed it down. Other classes, they're already on chapter 19. Go home, read it, and take a quiz. But that's not how we're working here. We're working here so that it's a seminar scenario in the sense that you are thoroughly understanding nuances of language. The other thing is we are really celebrating this amazing woman who, at 18 years old, took 19 months to write this book. And there's all kinds of little funny inconsistencies in it too. I'm calling this Injustice and Sorrow in Chapter 7. Everybody say, Injustice and Sorrow in Chapter 7. Your answer should be text-based. You should be going right to the text when you're making a point, okay? Another question we're going to be asking is, where is Mary Shelley in the text? How can we tell that she's there? Okay, everybody ready? We're relatively quiet. Madam, tell me, are we ready to go? Are we recording now?
Yes.
Okay, who's on camera? You're on camera? Okay. I don't want to break it looking at me. All right. Injustice and Sorrow, Chapter 7, Frankenstein. Who would like to pick up the conversation? Ava? What is unjust and what is sorrowful in this chapter? Yes?
Justine is accused of a murder, and Victor, so Justine is accused of a murder. Victor knows who the real murderer is, or he thinks it's the creature that he created, but Justine was accused, and it was very unjustly because she didn't commit the murder, wait. Yeah.
Well, how do people feel about this injustice? I mean, for example, what does Elizabeth say about this injustice?
She wishes she could die with her.
What line is that?
That's
Man, how's our Omni mic doing?
It is going well.
Do I need to be passing the microphone?
Yeah, if you want.
Okay.
Well, yes, actually.
it's in chapter 7. This is like when she's dying. She says this, like before they kill.
Let's go to page 67. This This was a dire blow to Elizabeth, who had relied with firmness upon Justine's innocence. Alas, said she, how shall I ever believe in human goodness? Justine, whom I loved and esteemed as my sister, how could she put on those smiles of innocence only to betray? Her mild eyes seemed incapable of any severity or guile, and yet she has committed a murder. Is that what Elizabeth really is going to believe after just, what does Justine say to this comment?
Justine explains further after that she confessed, but she confessed a lie because of the priest telling her that she would burn in hell if she didn't admit to it. So Elizabeth takes back what she says. She's like, I shouldn't even have thought about that. And she goes further and Justine tells them to go on with their lives because they both know that, and deep down she knows that she didn't do it and she was just protecting everybody else.
So what happens now to, as a result, will somebody pick up the conversation? Yes.
Elizabeth said, I did confess, but I confessed a lie. I confessed that I might obtain absolution, like in the false confession, the rag and bone shop, and everything else. She wanted to obtain absolution by confessing. She wanted to get it off her shoulders, but when she confessed, she made a huge mistake by actually confessing. Because not only did everyone think she was the murderer, they had evidence that she was the murderer because she confessed.
How does this lead to more sorrow?
She died.
Who was feeling really sorrowful about all this?
Victor feels really sorrowful.
Tell us about that.
Victor, he wept with tears because the creation that he created in his laboratory had killed Justine, and Elizabeth is blaming it for herself.
Line? Here, pass down.
I think Victor's upset just because he wanted his creation to do good, and instead it's harming people, and it's the reason Justine died, and he can't do anything about it, or else he'll sound crazy. So he's just kind of he's stuck.
Well, who else dies? As a result of his creation.
Yeah.
William dies, Justine dies, and what is the effect on Alphonse?
Miserable.
Lines? Who can find the lines about how Alphonse is feeling?
I found it. Page 72.
72?
It says, our house was the house of mourning. My father's house was deeply shaken by the horror of the recent events. Alphonse even heard of it, and he was completely distraught about it. All these people dying left and right because of no reason whatsoever. And they think it's like a mass murderer, and they think they put the murder away. But actually, it's some 8-foot tall green guy that Victor created. And
We don't know that for sure. How do we know that?
Because Victor himself said when he went to Geneva, he saw on the Swiss Alps that he saw the creature standing on top of the mountain after Justine was murdered.
Okay.
And I think that's quite enough evidence to believe that yes, the monster is the murderer. But if Victor said that he was the murderer, then he would be sound crazy and dismissed.
Okay.
This all could have been avoided if Victor accepted the creature instead of like turning it away and like making it a disgrace, and like the creature kind of got hurt, and so he was only trying to search for his like owner to like accept him and love him. But like if Victor did like not disgrace his creation, I think the creature would have turned out
this? What evidence is it, yeah?
Also, to add on to what Rebecca said, one thing that really confuses me is that all woman figures in the book are really treated as graceful people, and I feel as if it's weird if those are such a big thing in this theme that he didn't make the creature a woman, because that would have a totally different outcome. It would be a much more graceful book than having this creature running around killing people, because that's not how the image of women are shown.
Thoughts? Yes.
I would like to dispute your claim. I don't think that it's enough evidence to just see the creature and say that they killed it, because think about Justine. They just found the locket in her pocket, a mere coincidence. What if he was just there visiting the mountains because he really liked the mountains? We are just basing off the fact that he's a monster. Since the beginning, we see him as a monster, so we think he's the murderer. And
Since the birth of this monster, he's been treated with extreme unkindness and as an outsider, and that is a common denominator in a lot of killers, and they're not treated nicely ever. And so I think that it could be evidence that he is the
Like Perry said before, the whole the creature being female, since so many of the female characters in the book are so elegant and graceful. I also agree with her that if the creature was female, it might have turned out a little differently, because since girls are depicted as such gentle, just very docile creatures, it doesn't make sense in my brain to risk it by making a man, if that is such the stereotype about women.
I gotta say, I've never heard in my life people conjecturing, if you would have made creature a female, there might be a different outcome. Now, I want to dispute some claims though. Not every single female is depicted so kindly. There's one female who is not depicted so nicely. Yes, Naika?
Isn't that Justine's mother?
Is that Justine? Tell us about that. What's she like? What's Justine's mother like?
I don't really have much to say about her, because,
She treated Justine badly, and
How did she treat her? How would you describe her? Chapter 7. What did Justine's mother do that's really,
I found
yes,
it. Page 51.
page 51, chapter 6, right?
What it says in chapter 6 on page 51, it says that after Justine's father had died, Madame Moritz was a widow with 4 children, and Justine was a third. But even though she was one of her favorite as her father's point of view, but Mary describes this as a strange perversity, where her mother couldn't endure her, and her aunt, Justine's aunt, had to come over and take matters into her own hands to talk to the Frankenstein family. And even then, she wasn't even adopted into them. She was shown as a, so.
What about that word? I didn't see that word yet in the book. She just uses that word perversity to describe Justine's mother. Isn't that an interesting word?
But I want to say something about, this is kind of like a pattern though, because we've seen this before. When Victor was describing Mr. Kremp, he described him as a squat man with a gruff voice because he didn't agree with him. And now we see a mother who abuses her child also being a cruel person and looking kind of bad, I guess. So maybe it's all in Victor's mind or Elizabeth's too. When you don't agree with someone, with what someone's doing, they look bad.
Interesting. Yes?
I also believe that Justine's death was really unfair because it says on page 52, poor Justine was very ill, but other trials were reserved for her. One by one her brothers and sisters died, and her mother, with the exception of her neglected daughter, was left childless. And she was left sick, alone, and without a home. And when she died, I think that's the most unfair thing, because that's just brutal at that point. Or instead of brutal, it could also be a mercy to kill someone like that who's left all battered and bruised. I think that could be a mercy, maybe by whether it be creature, whether it be some other person.
Folks, last night I went to a play at Palm Beach Atlantic College, and the play was called Hecuba, and it's an ancient Greek tragedy. And so, as you guys may or may not know, that's one of my areas of expertise, ancient Greek drama. So I've staged many myself, and I've seen many, and I went to see it last night. It was powerful. But the main character, Hecuba, is the mother of Hector, and she's the queen of Troy, but Troy's been taken over. And so now she goes from being a queen to being a slave. And the Greeks say that the tomb of Achilles, the ghost of Achilles, demands the sacrifice of her daughter Polyxena. So this daughter is very brave. She says, I choose death rather than to live out my life as a slave. And Euripides, and this play is from 424 BC, she gives this speech that just reminded me of Justine Moritz. She says, she calmly faces death. And I just thought it was so shocking because we often see people begging for their lives. Please don't kill me. And this lady is very, they've lost everything. So and this horrible reversal of being very wealthy and powerful to being a slave. Can you imagine? You are the queen, and now you have to scrub dishes, and they kick you, and you're living in dirt. So how does Justine face death? And when I say sorrow and injustice in chapter 8, what are some of the, how do people respond? How do you respond to her facing the way that she faces her life and her death?
Well, I think she's very mature about it because she begs for Elizabeth's forgiveness and tries to reason with her because she knows that she's about to be executed. So she wants to kind of get this pain off of her chest to know that the people that she cares about at least knows why she's going and knows that it's unfair. But she doesn't seem as afraid of it as normally people are because death is inevitable. So she kind of has this understanding of I'm leaving, this is why, and it's not fair, but I gotta go kind of thing. So, yeah.
What is some of the language that they're using in the story to describe this facing of death and the subsequent sorrow being felt by Elizabeth and Victor? What lines do we see? How do we know this?
Victor, about his personality, we kind of see that he doesn't like things that he can't control. And on page 68, on the last paragraph, he says, the poor victim who on the morrow was to pass the awful boundary between life and death felt not as I did, such deep and bitter agony. He was saying that he felt even worse than Justine, even though she was the one that was going to die.
Mm-hmm.
But he had to live with it until he eventually died.
He has to live with it, and he says, I gnashed my teeth and ground them together, uttering a groan from my inmost soul. And Justine,
Another thing I have to add on to what Dr. Bell said before about the play that he watched and how she would rather die and how she went from riches to rags very quickly. It also reminds me of Beaufort and how he was very rich and he had, like, he was brave enough to pay off his debts and he wasn't comfortable, so he left. He fell sick and he was very poor and Caroline had to take care of him. And it also is like also a mix of Justine, and she'd rather not be here with knowing the fact that people think she's a murderer, and rather just take that despair off of her chest and go forward with what the people actually want from her, even though it might not be the best thing.
I agree with you. I wanted to say one thing about Mr. Porter's comments to me yesterday about the ancient Greek term aletheia, which means uncovering. The truth is something that is uncovered. And here, the complexity of the story is that Victor has to endure knowing the truth, and he, even if he wanted to reveal it, he cannot. And this is like a double bind. I think it makes, it's a turn of the screw in the sense of irony and bitterness. I'm sorry, somebody was gonna talk? Yes.
If
We
we
can
go
hear
back,
your voice pretty good.
if we go back to the kindness of what if Creature is just misunderstood, I'm gonna have to refute that, because if we believe that he's murdered Justine and he's murdering all these people, in the movie when Creature murdered that girl, drowned her, which
By accident.
by accident, yes. But I'm gonna also have to refute that. Like, there's no way that can be an accident, because he spent the majority of his life being mistreated by Victor, being pushed away by everyone else. So he holds a grudge against everyone, and he's just gonna want to take revenge, basically.
I disagree with that a little because Creature, yes, was mistreated all his life, but he was never taught any kindness or what to do and what not to do. It's like a baby, but grown up. Because if you teach a child wrong from right, it would know. But he was never taught what's wrong and what's right, what to do and what not to do. So he would have not known because, he was never taught.
Yeah, but if we also think about the movie and how there are so many disparities between the book and the movie, like how the "it's alive" scene, that's completely cut out. Like, that's not even from the book. The Creature just wakes up and goes to Victor and scares him. That's not a thing. And this could also be like a plot hole put in the movie just for production, basically.
I agree with Gianna. I feel like he was never, like, he held a grudge because people looked at him and thought he's a monster. And now that he's doing things, people still just look at him and think he's a monster. We're feeding that part of him. As we read the book and we think he's a monster, he did this, we're making him more angry. We have to believe in him, I want to talk about like another character in this book, Elizabeth. Like, during this time, she, like, while the Creature was being created, she was left to fend for the tend to the children and take care of the household and everything. After Caroline just died, she's like, now you're in this role, like you're in Caroline's role now. And so she hasn't seen Victor in like 4 years, and a lot can change in 4 years, especially how you're feeling for someone. And like, I think she got really depressed being, you have to do this, you have no time for yourself and to love someone like Victor, who just basically kind of like put you on hold basically for his own needs. He didn't spend time with you. And I feel like the book I'm reading, The Vindication of the Rights of Women, is written by Mary Wollstonecraft, Mary Shelley's mother. She, like, was depressed and wanted to commit suicide with, and I'm trying to make a connection between them because of she had an affair with this person and had a daughter named Fanny who later committed suicide. And she wanted to try to work things out, and he basically like made her life a living hell and like did really mean things and everything. And she tried to commit suicide a bunch of times. But then when she met Mary Shelley's father,
William Godwin.
yeah, he was really nice and respected her, and then she died later in childbirth. But yeah, I just want to make a connection because like the women in any of these books like were treated very like wrongly, and yeah, and I feel like Elizabeth was never given the chance to really like, love Victor and like try to work things out because he spent time with Preacher like, instead of her, right? And like creating. So, yeah.
Just hang on one second. There are so many interesting facets when we think of a jewel that has many facets to it. There are many facets to this story, but I did want to just take a few moments to explore Mary Shelley and her mother in this story. And also, I've been wanting to offer to the class somebody for extra credit to do a really amazing chronology, because, for example, when I teach this story again, I want to be able to say, when did Mary's first child die in relationship to the May or June 1816 event of the ghostwriting competition. And then she has 2 more children die, and the whole I think the whole and I read a lot of stuff on this, and I cannot get it straight in my mind when these kids are dying in relationship to the book. But it is, I just want to take one more moment for you to share with us your notes on the book. And I'm very proud of you, Rebecca, because I ordered these books and somebody else is reading, and you're reading the Virginia, the Elizabeth book. But just share with us now a little bit what you found out, and let's take the conversation into Mary Shelley herself and how this book is resonating with her life.
So, Mary Wollstonecraft wrote a bunch of books, and mainly about women's education. And then she wrote this book, which is about like women's rights and like how her experience was. And in the intro, it kind of talks about her life, because in Frankenstein, all you know is like she died in childbirth and she's Mary Shelley's mother. They don't really go into it, but she herself had an interesting life, let's just say. And so she she had like different husbands, and mainly she had an affair with
Gilbert Imlay.
Yeah, and he, she then had a daughter named Fanny, and then he abandoned them, and she went on this trip on a boat to basically try to like resolve their, like to work out their relationship and everything, and with her infant, and they said demoralized Mary. Then she twice attempted suicide.
Well, he was this rich American businessman, raconteur, running around revolutionary France and running around with all these radical writers in England. And he thought but he didn't want to just like say, oh, I'm taking responsibility for this job.
Right.
She was chasing him and he was running away from her, and she got depressed.
Right.
But the paradox is that she's fighting for women's rights,
Right.
but on her emotional level, she was still kind of stuck in this trying to please the men. Now, her own father was an abusive, horrible person.
Yeah, he abused their whole family basically, and then it starts when she goes into the actual intro about the book. She talks about how in the intro she's like, I don't want to offend my own like gender, like sex, about how like because these topics are basically kind of brutal about like how she talks about women and stuff like that, and I found it a little upsetting to like see these women treated like this, and yeah, that's basically, she's just really going in depth and trying to tell the world about what really happened during that time. And it's very interesting.
Okay, yeah,
Another thing that we really have to think about is that she is actually just 18 years old writing this book. And it's really crazy to think because 18-year-olds nowadays are stuck on their phone, driving around. They're not really going outside. They're just not very aware of what's going on around them. But at that time, there was a lot of people that were focused on what they liked to do because they didn't have the things that we do nowadays around them. And it's really crazy to think that somebody just of 18 years of age, like they just turned into a young adult or like an older young adult.
well, what do you see, how do you see her, what you know about her life in these particular chapters right now?
I see how all the sorrow she has been through, like even though she's 18 years of age, she has been through a lot with her relationship with Shelley is also one main thing too. Like they see each other not as really relationship like love-wise mainly. They see each other more as literature giants, like you said. Like they see each other more as professional units. And it's crazy to think that she can't really leave him either because without him she wouldn't be really anywhere.
Well, she's been kind of, her father said, it's either you stay here or you go with him, and he was very upset because she runs off around 15 years old to be with him.
Yeah. So that was
But in the
main
book, I
factor.
mean, what's going on with the book? I mean, what evidence is there in the book of her? Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say another thing.
Oh, go ahead.
What she just said, women were supposed to be the perfect wife, the perfect mom, and they were supposed to be beautiful or they would be nothing. And in Rebecca's book, I believe there was a line that said something about our whole life is about marriage.
Yeah, like it said the only way a woman could rise in the world is by marriage. And basically without a man by their side, they were nothing. And they couldn't do anything. Like if you couldn't have children, or like you would basically be like in the dirt, poor. And like you would have nothing. Like you couldn't survive. And you needed someone to lean on to make a living, and
I wanted to read something from the book I'm reading.
Okay.
So, how Paris said she's only 18 years old, and you can see that she's been through a lot. In my book, in the introduction, I believe, in the introduction, the author explained this in a way better than I could ever do. She says, and that was where I found my story, with the girl given to a boy as a gift, with the girl whose whole life revolves around the brilliant boy she loves, with the girl who inadvertently helps create a monster, with a teenage girl, because as Mary Shelley proved, nothing is more brilliant or terrifying than that.
Wow.
Yeah, I completely agree because back in this time when this book was created, girls were technically given to men as gifts. They were supposed to be in the house 24/7, working on taking care of the kids, cleaning the house, making sure the man is happy. And now our whole vision on women has changed throughout the years, and it's very strange to see how it was back then, because now I can't even imagine what it'd be like to be in their position.
Well, are we standing on really Mary Wollstonecraft's shoulders? And she is called, this is a term I never heard, a proto-feminist. Now, look that up. That is a really fascinating term. What is a proto-feminist? Yes?
If we look at the little theme we've created of the book and how it's so contradictory and it's a paradox, what if we look at it different? What if we say that she's arguing of the unfairness of all the men doing all these unjust things, and all these women dying and being treated so unfairly is just her feelings being expressed. She doesn't have a hate for women. She's not forcefully making them die. This is happening in real life in that period, and they're literally saying that, oh, this is so unfair, this is unjust, this is what is happening in the form of Preacher and taking out his
Well,
brains.
in a few minutes though, folks, I definitely buckle your seatbelts, because this show is just getting rolling. Because Creature is going to make his appearance, and he is going to speak as eloquently as anybody. But of course, it's Mary Shelley's voice. Go ahead.
Like Tim said about the whole, the situation with Creature being, might be what's happening in real life at that time, I completely get it, because Frankenstein creates this creature, and he doesn't take any responsibility for anything that the creature does. It kills William and puts Justine in jail, and eventually kills her, but he takes no responsibility for it. He doesn't say anything about it. It's taken out on a tiny, innocent child and a young woman who doesn't.
Well, what about his father? His father,
Yeah.
they go over this thing. How much loss has Alphonse had in this story?
A lot.
Tell us.
So,
Can you itemize his loss?
So first he loses Caroline.
He loses
after-
Caroline.
And then he loses William, which is a big. He loses Victor first, kind
He
of.
loses Victor.
Because
He
he's
hasn't seen Victor in 6
not
years.
seeing him. Then he loses William and Justine, and at this point he feels very sad because in the end he was supposed to be the one that was supposed to go away first. Like he's the oldest and he's like the father, and even the fact that Caroline had died before him just brought him really down, and the fact that three main people in his life proceeding after that had to be passing away because of that. And I also want to say two other things. We'll backtrack to what we said about the creature. They were just talking about how he wasn't really shown the right ways of doing stuff, and Victor doesn't take any responsibility. Like for instance, when he goes up to his room after Henry Clerval comes over, he feels relieved that the creature's in there, but he doesn't think about what the creature could do because he's not there.
Right.
So it's a really crazy thing to think about.
and I also want to talk about how Mary Shelley was only 18 when she wrote Frankenstein, and like I feel and like how much emotion she put into this. I think that the death of her mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, like growing up without a mother, I think kind
And
of
a cantankerous relationship with her stepmother,
right.
Mrs. Claremont. They hated each other.
Right. So like I feel like she put some of that emotion too, and that's how like what created so much emotion in this
Well,
Frankenstein.
kind of what I was
death
looking.
of family members and the hate of her stepmom and stuff.
Yeah, I think that the mother of Justine is kind of a reflection, would you guys say, of her own stepmother. So there's resonance, William is like her own child that died, but Alphonse is doubly suffering because he and Elizabeth are very close, and when he sees that Elizabeth feels betrayed and is suffering and doesn't want to see life as something positive, that is crushing to him. And this turmoil of Alphonse continues throughout the book.
I also want to make another connection through Rebecca's book. It explains how marriage is the main thing that builds up life or something. You could also see this that in the book it explains how Caroline, she was nothing after her father passed away, but when Alphonse came in and brought her up, her marriage really brought everything back to life. And it really shows at the time she's putting in her mom's words, her mother's words into the book, even though it's not very
Would you agree
Yeah,
with that?
definitely.
She's putting her mother's,
Yeah.
she's reading her mother's books.
Yes.
And she's putting,
so
and
she really walks in like her shadow, and
Right.
she builds up her own self using what her mother has like researched and her opinion on women's vindications of rights. So it's a really big thing.
I want to say that you guys have exceeded my expectations today. I'm very proud of the entire class. Everybody was nice and supportive. I personally think it's better to go slowly with an archetypal book like this. You're not going to get the chance to have a seminar-style approach. And as I said, buckle your seatbelts because it's going to be crazy next. Yes.
Also, if you look at